Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a creative and empathetic 20-year-old son, Joey, who is trying to figure out adulthood. Aren't we all? I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. If you're a seeker who's wanting to move forward in your life, contact me to work with you as a coach. This podcast helps anyone impacted by adoption, and the general public will understand adoption's complexities better after listening to. In today's episode, you will hear how an adopted person has struggled from relinquishment trauma and adoption trauma, but who has also found some powerful healing. Jonathan Moon was adopted to the U.S. from Korea at age 9 after spending 2 years on the streets in Korea. He reunited through a Korean TV show with his grandmother who raised him until age 7. He is making an artistic film about his life called Voice of Waters, which will be amazing. You have never heard a story quite like Jonathan's. So thank you for sharing your life with us, Jonathan. Welcome to Unraveling Adoption.
Thank you, Beth. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And I should say I met you at Untangling Our Roots in Denver last April, and it was great hanging out with you and getting to know you a bit. So I love those in-person events.
Yeah, it was definitely a long time coming.
Was that your first time?
It's my first time. It was my first adoption conference. Pretty late stage in my life. Decided to attend Untangling Your Roots this year. And then I finally went to also my first Korean American adoption conference, Con, as well, this year as well. So
nice.
Yeah, so I'm just going full steam ahead.
Woohoo! Oh, there's so much healing to be found when you find others that share your similar story. No one has the same story, but just, you don't have to explain a whole bunch of stuff. You just dive right in and people are nodding their heads going, yes. Is that what you felt?
Yes, there's definitely a community that really felt like they immediately understood you.
Yeah.
Unlike others who are not adopted, who just don't know even how to even start the conversation.
Yeah. And you just have to be in the role of educator or raising awareness or defending yourself or whatever. So all that can get dropped when you're in a room with a bunch of adoptees. I'm sure that is very helpful for adopted people for sure. It's extremely helpful for me as an adoptive parent to kind of witness that and to observe and to learn from you all. So thank you. And thank you for being here and sharing more of your story here. Why don't we start with just telling us whatever parts of your adoption story you'd like to share, kind of the bones of it?
Oh, wow. So I can give you a very high level chronological view. So yeah, I was born out of wedlock. My mother was, I think, like 21. My father was like 44. He actually cheated on his wife and his family with my mother at the time. Come to find out later, he actually spoke pretty good English. He was selling dictionaries with a friend of his and got to my mom's parents' doorstep. My mom was only in her early 20s and saw my mom, and I guess he just couldn't resist. And He went after her. And I think maybe less than a year later, they had me. And that kind of uprooted not just my mom's life and not just my dad's life either, but also his kids.
Oh, he had other kids.
He had 3 other kids. So my 3 older half-brothers, correct.
And this relationship with your birth mom was secret and kind of covert, I'm guessing.
In the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, after the reunion and the subsequent decade, I would say, over a decade, I found out more information on my dad eventually leaving his wife at the time and his family at the moment, and I guess trying to make things work with my mom. They apparently got married close to the DMZ, was what I was told in Korea. And they got married, I think, when I was 3 years old. I don't have any memories of that. And then, eventually I ended up living with my brothers and him, but I'll get to that later. So my dad meets my mom, they have me. And the first memory that I ever have was, I think a lot of people can relate, is a traumatic memory. I had to be no more than 3 or 4. I was sitting in my grandma's lap in the kitchen of my parents' apartment. My grandma and I were both watching kind of a argument that was going on with my birth father and my mother in the other room. We could look straight ahead and could see the commotion. I remember him actually packing up his clothes in a suitcase. I don't know what they were discussing, but it was pretty intense. And I remember my mom either yelling, but it was some kind of like a light scuffle, but What I remember is my dad slapping her across the face and her falling back onto the bed.
Okay. Oof.
And then what ensued after that was my grandmother, who's my maternal grandmother, that's my mom's mom, put me down pretty hastily and ran after my mom, got on top of my mom, and was actually screaming at my mom and pulling her hair. I panicked, as I think any kid would. I got on top of my grandmother's back, crying, trying to pull my grandma's hair and trying to pull my grandma off my mom.
Oh, okay.
That's my memory.
That's tough.
So after that, that was my first and my only time I ever saw my mom and my dad together.
Oh, that's your only memory of them together. Wow.
My only memory. Oof. Next thing I remember is my grandma was the one who actually raised me. I don't know what happened between then, but I just remember my maternal grandmother raising me north of Seoul until I was probably 6 or 7.
Okay.
Between that time, when I was growing up at my grandma's place, I had the ideal childhood. I had friends in the neighborhood. It's very much a typical Asian culture where everybody is together taking care of each other. And that was the case when I was with my grandmother. My grandma would wake up in the morning and go to work at an army base. Okay. So I would wake up, she would already have breakfast made for me. And then I would just have full independence, going outside, playing. And it was just pretty much almost everyday occurrence where, I go outside and play with my friends and the neighborhood would watch out for us.
And that was just kind of the way things were then? Or
yeah,
that wasn't deemed neglectful at that time?
No, that was the way things were.
It takes a village kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
It takes a village to raise a kid, right? And that's what everybody did in that town. And it was just that small neighborhood within that town. Right next to my grandma's house was a supermarket, and I would go there to have lunch. I would always call her the supermarket ajumma. Ajumma is like a older lady. Okay. It's an endearing term, I guess. Yeah, I would go to the supermarket on most days and have lunch there, and then wait till my grandma came home, later that afternoon. Okay. And then we would have dinner. And that was just my typical childhood. I had a really memorable childhood with my grandmother. Okay. My birth mother really was never in my life. She showed up, apparently once in a while. I was told later on that she came and visited me all the time. Oh. And I don't remember that. I only have maybe 1 or 2 memories of her visiting me. Okay. And I actually asked my current therapist, why don't I remember anything like this? Why don't I remember my mom visiting? And she said, well, maybe for a young kid like you, maybe it was just too hard to take. Maybe it was so unstable that you didn't know when you're going to see your mom. Yeah. It was just your coping mechanism to not be so disappointed in your mother or whatever. Yeah. So that was the case with my mom. I don't really have many memories of her. And then fast forward, I was about 6, 7. And I remember my birth father coming to my grandma's house and us having a conversation for me to go live with him. Okay. I can't see why I wanted to, or maybe I wanted to. I really don't know. But from my memory, I don't see why I would want to go live with him since I was having a good old time.
You sounded like you were doing well.
Yeah.
Whose idea was it for you to go to your dad's?
So it wasn't really anybody's idea from what I gathered, because I was at the age where I had to start going to school. Oh. And I was in Korea back in the days, and it's still this way, but it's a little bit different. But back in the days, you were under the man's registry. Okay. The father's registry. So that's like a social security number for every kid, whatever. It's just a way for them to be able to track you and your family and your family hierarchy.
Okay. So you had to go wherever your dad was.
Yes. So for me to be able to go to school, I had to go live with him.
Okay. Now he had a wife and a family though, right?
At that moment, no. Oh, okay. So he was living in a 1-bedroom housing apartment with me, my 3 older half brothers, and him. Oh. It was a pretty normal lower class where everybody kind of slept on the floor. Okay. So when I started to go live with him and started school, that's when pretty much all the problems started. Okay. So I immediately did not want to stay there. My older half brothers were not very nice to me, except the middle one. Okay. The middle one I got along with extremely well. Okay. And he actually left the house a little earlier than the other 2. Okay. My 2 other older half brothers were not the nicest to me from their perspective. If I was seeing it, here comes a kid who ruined their family's life. Yeah.
They probably had some resentment.
Yeah. That's my guess. I have no facts to back that up. So problems started once I started living with my birth father. He was definitely an alcoholic. He was quite abusive. I eventually started running away. I would run away to my grandma's house in the beginning with no money. So my dad lived about a 30-minute car ride. With no money, I would actually go on the bus.
Okay.
Back then this was probably 1985, 1986. I was probably around 7 years old. I would get on the bus. And back then, you don't have these little coin machines that you just put your money in. Korea was a developing country still at the time. They would have bus stewardesses.
Oh, okay. That would come by and
walking down the aisle, collecting money.
Tickets.
Yeah, exactly.
Tickets. Yeah. Okay.
When she was starting to approach to collect money, I would pretend that I was asleep.
Oh, okay. And you're just a kid. Maybe they thought you were with somebody else.
Well, generally, somebody I was sitting next to, they will say, I don't know who this kid, whatever. But the bus stewardess would try to wake me up. But there was no way that she was going to wake me up because I didn't have any money.
Super smart.
And yeah, it's pretty amazing thinking back then. I'm like, wow, like kids are when they have to be, are very resilient.
Yeah. But at that age, to be able to figure out the bus, and then you had to go from the bus to your grandma's house, right?
Yeah.
You must have really good spatial intelligence and courage. My goodness.
So the final bus stop was actually in Donggucheon bus station.
Okay.
So bus stop at Donggucheon, I would walk to my grandma's house, and then I would maybe spend a couple days with her, and she said, you have to go to school.
Oh, okay.
So my grandma would actually help me get me back to my dad's.
She would take you back. Oh, did you argue and say, no, I can't go back there, I'm getting beat up? And
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I would because I didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
But there were a good handful of times when she would take me back, or when I eventually went back by myself, my dad's place would be empty.
Oh.
So I would get back to his place. Everything would be moved out.
Oh.
My grandma would have to find a way to find my dad, or I would have to find a way to call my grandma to have her come and get me and try to figure out a way to get me back to my dad's new place.
Oh, how unsettling.
So eventually, after being turned away from my grandmother, saying that I would have to go back to my dad, I couldn't necessarily rely on my grandma to necessarily keep me safe from my dad.
Okay.
And that's when I started to have my fun adventure living on the streets.
God, I can't imagine at that young age. Wow.
Yeah.
But it was fun for you? Like, are you serious fun or sarcastic fun?
I think both.
Okay.
I think I had that sense of freedom where I could do anything I want.
Nobody's telling me what to do.
Nobody's telling me what to do.
Okay.
I still wonder to this day, but there were a couple instances where I would try to persuade a friend of mine to run away with me so I could have company.
I bet. Now, were you still going to school even though you're living on the streets?
No, I wasn't going to school.
Just disengaged from everything.
Yeah, I was disengaged with everything.
No mandated reporters or nobody helping you out. Shoot.
No. There's one instance when I fell asleep, a street vendor food tent.
Okay.
If anybody watches K-drama,
okay,
you've probably seen it.
Yeah.
Those are some of the places that I would sleep because it would be emptied out. Me and my friend would try to look for food there. Most of the time we couldn't find anything, but we at least had some kind of shelter to fall asleep. Wow. And there was one instance where I got caught stealing food out of a small family market.
Okay.
They made me give them my dad's phone number somehow. And my dad picked me up that night and beat the living crap out of me.
I was going to say, that sounds really dangerous. Oh,
yeah.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Oof. God.
But there were different creative ways where you could find sleep. I would sometimes go back to my dad's place and there was a storage room right next to where my dad and brothers were living. And I would just crawl in that storage room. It was a different room.
Okay.
And there was a small window and I could see them having dinner, talking about me and things like that. Oh, wow. So yeah, that was kind of like my life with my birth father.
That sounds so rough.
But at the age of 8, I'll never forget this either. It's clear as day. And the funny thing is I spoke fluent Korean. I didn't speak a lick of English, right?
Sure.
And my memory, when I go back to that moment, is the dialogues and the conversations we had were all English.
Oh.
It's kind of weird how our memory works. But yeah, he was doing the dishes. I remember him looking up at me because I was by the doorway. And he said, Hoon, which is my Korean name, Hoon, do you want to go to America? Well, at the time, I've seen some American stuff on TV, how amazing America is. This was during the time of Ronald Reagan's era. Oh. It was a very prosperous time, right, economically, and the U.S. was on TV all the time. I remember when the Challenger exploded on TV. That made it over to the Korean news, obviously, and I saw that as a kid, big rocket just exploding. But everybody had positive views on America, but I had no idea where America was.
Okay.
Like I literally thought America was next door, like just a town away.
How would you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So when he said, do you want to go to America? I thought, yeah. And I assumed that it was going to be me, my brothers, and him.
With them, yes.
Yeah, with them.
Gosh.
He just said, do you want to go to America? I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And next thing I know, I'm in the director's office at the orphanage, not too far away from where we were living.
Wow.
Got pictures taken. That's one of the pictures I actually sent you.
Oh, God. Yeah, that picture. Oof.
Yeah, that's the first picture that they took of me. And that was my second to last time I saw my father that day. And I was put into the orphanage. I recently found out because I was looking at my paperwork. It was back in August of 1987 was when I was placed in the orphanage.
Wow.
And I was adopted, I think, in March.
Oh, so you're there a couple of months.
8 months.
Do you have memories of being in the orphanage?
I do. Nothing traumatic or nothing bad.
Okay.
There were a lot of kids. I was definitely one of the older kids, for sure. And there were a lot of babies there. There were a lot of foster mothers that took care of the babies. And we played a lot outside. And there were a couple of rooms in the orphanage, and we all slept on the floor. And I'll never forget, how crowded it was. It was just all kids just crowded in one or two rooms, just sleeping on the floor.
Wow.
And that was a normal thing back then, or sleeping on the floor, right?
Okay.
But everybody had their space to sleep. And I don't have bad memories necessarily, but I don't have a lot of memories. I was surprised that I was actually there for 7 or 8 months because of the number of memories I have, which isn't a whole lot. So maybe it was something that I blocked out. I really don't know.
Okay. Do you know why your dad relinquished you to the orphanage? Was it just because you kept running away? He just didn't know how to deal with you?
So after the reunion, I found out from a family friend that rumor was that my dad was trying to get back with the mother of his other boys.
Oh.
That he had to get rid of me because I would never be part of the deal.
Wow.
That's what I was told from a family friend.
Oh, that's painful. And it hurts because on many levels, but you think orphanage and you think orphan is someone with no parents. But you really had at least two, your grandmother and your dad, who were there alive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not perfect or ideal, but you were not an orphan, right? Do you ever think about like that?
I mean, I guess not. I mean, my birth father is the one who actually made me an orphan.
Yeah, I guess he just undid it. That must just hurt at such a deep core level. I can't even imagine what that must be like.
Oh, I still struggle with it.
I'm sure.
I still struggle with it, and that's part of my healing process, right?
Whew.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going with your story. So you got adopted to the U.S. through the agency there?
Yeah, through KSS.
Okay. And you knew zero English or very little English, I bet?
So I knew hello. So I remember when I was living on the streets, I would see American soldiers.
Oh.
And I would try to be like, hello, some little Korean kid trying to spark up a conversation with an American, and they would just respond back, hi, or whatever. That was that.
Okay.
But I knew hamburger and I knew hot dog.
Okay, but those are the important words.
Yeah. So hot dogs were corn dogs in Korea, but we called them hot dogs, or something like that.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was all I knew.
Oh my gosh. What do you remember from those first days and weeks of coming to America with your adoptive family?
So it was an adventure. I mean, I think as a kid, you're just excited with all the new things, even though you don't know how to really talk to anybody. I'll never forget coming out of the O'Hare airport. So it was me and a brother and sister. Our families still kept in contact. We only lived less than an hour away from each other. The brother and sister got adopted together. I think they were about a year younger than me. Once we got out of the main gate, there were families obviously waiting for arrival. And it was very clear who the adoptive family was because they had signs, they had balloons.
Okay.
And they were just, waiting for the arrival. And I was trying to play it cool. Like, oh, this is going to be fun. Uh-huh. And I didn't understand that I was actually going to live in America forever.
Okay. You thought this was like a trip, a little break.
This was a trip or this was a temporary thing. Maybe I'd eventually go back. I didn't realize that this is going to be a serious thing when I was actually in the Korean airport leaving for America that day, when my grandma was being held back.
So you're like, oh, this is more than just a little trip. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, she was being held back by her two sisters. Yeah, I'll never forget that. That's seared into my brain.
And is it that patrilineal situation? Why couldn't you just have gone back to grandma's? Was it that legalistic kind of school thing or something else?
I think that was part of it for sure. I think that was the main driver. The other part of it was very hard for my grandma to take care of me.
Sure.
It wasn't her job. She took care of me until age 6 or 7. She took care of me as long as she could.
Yeah. But it wasn't because she didn't love you or care for you. She deeply cared for you.
Yeah.
But just circumstances. Okay.
Circumstances.
Okay. So you're here in America and you're like, oh shit, this is serious. I'm going to be here now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
And how was your adoptive family at the beginning, at least? How did things go?
Oh, they try to accommodate me, obviously, and as any parent would, right? A kid who has no idea what he's doing. I entered 3rd grade in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I was just inserted right into class, and I had an ESL teacher who actually taught me English. Her name was Kathy Kinnaman. Okay. She was an amazing lady. She was instrumental in helping me learn English, first 2-3 years of my life until I went to junior high.
Great.
It took me about 1.5 years for me to be able to speak fluent English.
I'm sure. And then the writing, everything's so different from Korean. That must have been really hard.
Yeah.
At that age. Oof. When you're little, like an infant or a 3-year-old, you don't read or write anyway. So you just sort of get the hang of it. But you already read and wrote in a different language. Yeah. That must have been tough. Were you an only child in your adoptive family?
No, I have an older brother, 7 months older than me. So not too much of a gap.
Biological to your adoptive parents?
Biological to my adoptive parents. And then I had 2 younger sisters who were also adopted from Korea.
Oh, okay.
None of us are related, but they were adopted when they were babies.
Okay.
And I was the last one that was adopted.
Well, it's hard for me to even grasp how much pain you've gone through. And I don't even know what else happened in your childhood, but just so far in your story, it's just like the number of relinquishments and unsettling and just insecure, those basic needs of a human being were not met at so many different times in your life. I just can't even imagine how painful that must be. And I'm so sorry. And if I saw you walking down the street, I would not even think that you had had trauma. You seem super pulled together. So,
so yeah, on the surface, I think many of us look like we're pulled together.
Yeah, because you do, because you have to, right?
You have to, right? What
choice do you have? Exactly. You got to just keep going.
Exactly,
And how did that pain, though, how has it manifested in your life? Did you find self-destructive behavior? Did you get depressed or?
Well, I definitely had my teenage years. I wasn't, I guess, atypical from other typical teenagers. I was more within myself than outwardly, I would say.
Okay.
I got in a decent amount of trouble, and that's something that reserved for the film. But
okay.
Nothing like, this kid needs to go to juvie or anything like that. Okay. So
just like a typical teenage testing boundaries and that kind of thing.
Yeah, a typical. And I think for me to, as a kid growing up and as a young adult, for me to be able to just kind of move forward with the world, I had my own coping mechanism. And I didn't realize it until a couple decades later.
Okay. What was that?
I was in the military for 4 years. It was this machismo, this you got to be a man kind of thing, testosterone. I think that's the best way I can describe how I try to carry myself.
Okay.
Where I didn't complain about things, kind of the cookie cutter societal expectation of what a male should be.
Okay. So you were strong, you just took it and you didn't whine about it or anything. I can deal with whatever it is.
I certainly tried. Yeah, I certainly tried. Yeah. I'm sure, I've had moments, multiple moments, but I certainly tried.
Okay.
But I didn't really realize the trauma that I had been shoving deep into my soul.
Oh, yeah.
And just cramming everything and just keeping it stored somewhere where I couldn't even find it.
Wow. How did you start digging through that? Was that the TV show in the reunion? Did that spark it, or was it after?
It certainly was a spark, I would say, but it wasn't anything that just kind of blew everything out of the water. So I can go into the reunion. This was in my late 20s. Okay. I was doing well. I had just gotten out of the military. I was going to university, trying to finish up my degree. And during this whole time in the U.S., I had been trying to get back to finding my grandma, trying to reconnect with her. Yeah, my adoptive mom had been very supportive at the time of trying to help me. She's a nurse. She actually got connected to a Korean woman through one of the patients. My mom ended up telling this Korean woman my story, and she says, "Oh, I'd be happy to try to help your son look for his grandmother." We all ended up having lunch, and she said, "Jonathan, can you send me all the information that you have, a picture of yourself and things like that, and I can see what I can do." I would say no more than 2 days later, I get a call from KBS. It's a Korean broadcasting station. It's one of the major broadcasting organizations in Korea. Called me and said, "Hey, we can look for your grandmother if you do a TV show with us."
Wow.
I'm like, okay. And at the time, before I went to America as a kid, my grandma actually wrote her address on the back of one of the photos.
Oh.
So that's an address I provided. The weird thing is that previous to all this, when I was a teenager, there was a family friend who was Korean who was going to visit Korea at the time. We were asking him, "Hey, can you go visit my grandma and see if my grandma's there? Tell her at least we're doing okay, and I want to reconnect with her." He said yes, but once he came back, he said, "Oh, your grandma doesn't live there anymore."
Oh.
Well, fast forward, I give this address to KBS. I'm like, I don't know. This is the last known address of my grandma. KBS calls back and say, "Hey, we found your grandma.
Oh my gosh.
She lives at the same place." And I was like, "What?"
So the other guy was lying or just never went? Or?
Well, he definitely lied, or he never went.
Dang it.
So she was living at the same place the whole time.
Wow.
It's the same place that I grew up as a kid.
Wow.
So they flew me out a week later. It was just so fast. And they started rolling the film the minute I got out of the airport and I met them. And I got reunited on the TV show with my grandmother.
Okay.
And this was in 2005.
Okay.
I reunited with my birth mother that night off camera because of the shame that she had. And it was taboo for a single mother to have a kid. And so
unusual. Was it a positive reunion or has it continued to be?
It was a positive reunion. Yeah, it was a very positive reunion. It was a lot. It was a lot for me to process. I eventually uprooted my whole life in the U.S. and ended up living in Korea for a couple of years as an adult. Pretty much after that, I had ended a relationship. Mm-hmm. It was a lot.
I'm just curious, did you still remember how to speak Korean fluently?
No.
Really? You had to relearn it?
I had to relearn it.
Oh, shoot. But it probably didn't take you as long as somebody that had to start all over.
And that's the funny thing. And I'm still learning.
Really?
Yeah. I can speak enough to get by.
God, the way the brain works.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Did you ever reconnect with your birth father?
So
that seems like a fraught relationship.
Yeah. So during the filming of the show, they released a preview that they were going to release, the show that I was on.
Okay.
They showed a preview on TV that was going to be released 3-4 days later or whatever.
Okay.
Well, my birth father saw that and he called KBS and he goes, "Hey, that's my son. I want to get reunited with him." Oh. And back then, we were filming still at the time. I said no. And my immediate reaction was no.
Yeah. Because
of the anger and internal bitterness that I had towards a man who discarded me to an orphanage.
Yeah.
So, I said no immediately without even thinking about it, without even a second of thought. I said no, absolutely not.
I don't blame you.
Because a part of me I wasn't sure what I would do at that moment if I saw him.
Yeah, I don't blame you for having very strong feelings about that. I have strong feelings and I barely know you. How could you do something like that? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into how you have found some healing. I assume that you have found some healing because you're able to talk about this publicly. You go to these conferences and are with other adoptees. What things have helped you to deal with these major traumas in your life?
So I didn't really come face to face with my trauma and started this healing process until very late in my life. Because like I said before, I shoved everything internally.
Sure.
Even after the reunion, I shoved everything internally.
Okay.
I'm still learning how to deal openly with my struggles.
Okay.
So this thing didn't start until probably COVID.
Oh, COVID.
Like many other people.
Yeah.
COVID was kind of the
self-discovery. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did you grab onto? What helped you?
So right before COVID, I started an acting class.
Oh.
I had always been a photographer, hobbyist, more or less, more traveling photography and things like that. I fell in love with photography and that kind of easily transitioned into, I want to do cinematography. That would be so cool.
Okay.
And then that transitioned to, that would be so cool to direct a film. Well, I was taking a filmmaking class And one of the teachers said, hey, if you're really serious about this, you should try acting, because you'll know how to at least get into the heads and learn how to talk to actors. You'll understand the process that they have to go through. Uh-huh. So I was like, all right. So I ended up taking an acting class, got on a waiting list with a great teacher here in Austin, Texas, and got into an acting class pretty much a couple months before COVID started.
Okay.
And obviously it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because I think for people who don't do these things, they don't realize how difficult it can be to come out with true emotions.
Yeah. They make it look
exactly to make it look authentic. It's not easy. I thought it was easy. Oh my God, was I so wrong? Okay. And one of the big things about being an actor is being vulnerable. You have to show, because you have to show true emotions. People who go to movie theaters, they know if somebody who's a bad actor, they just are acting, or they're actually being in the moment and showing that true emotion, right?
Yeah.
Is you have to have a certain level of vulnerability, a great level of vulnerability to show that. Mm-hmm. And when I was learning how to do that, that's when things started to kind of come up.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, what is this? What's going on here?
Okay. Wow. Interesting route to healing. Wow.
Yeah. So it took an acting class for me to realize I've been shoving problems down and just ignoring my whole life.
So did you seek therapy at that point?
Yeah. So with a combination of acting, and then when COVID happened, I saw the movie Honey Boy with Shia LaBeouf. He's a very complex person, right? Uh-huh. It was about Shia's life. It's this complex relationship with him and his dad. Okay. And he wrote it, and he actually acted as his father. And there was one scene where Shia's character gets in the face of a therapist because he has court-mandated therapy.
Okay.
And the therapist just kind of looks at him and goes, you see that forest out there? And he points out the window. You see that forest out there? I want you to just go out there just by yourself and just scream.
Okay.
And he's like, what? He goes, I just want you to go out to the forest and just scream it up. And then next cut, you see him by himself trying to just scream, but he just can't do it.
Wow.
And when I saw that scene, that was like, oh my God, that is what I've wanted to do.
That's you. Okay.
My whole life. So, oof.
Yeah, that's intense. That's intense.
So that's when I realized I got some problems.
Right. Okay. So you saw that movie, and that feeling of releasing that pent up emotion, it hit you like a ton of bricks. And you're like, oh, I might have a few things to deal with here.
It hit me. Yeah. Yeah. That was during COVID. This was 15 years after my reunion.
Yeah.
It took that long for me to realize that I just been going on through my life. Just ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that hit you. What kind of solutions have you found since then?
So I started talk therapy with an adoption specialist.
Okay.
She's been a great therapist. Her first name is Pam. So Pam, if you're listening, thank you.
We love you, Pam.
And then after that, I started exploring other avenues. My wife first introduced me to myofascia.
Okay. Myofascial. I've barely heard of that. Can you tell us briefly what that is?
So I've been to massage before.
Okay.
I went to Swedish Thai massage. Those are great. They work on your muscle and they try to loosen it. Well, the way she was telling me was, hey, I have a friend, and I've gone to her too, where she just barely touches you. She just places her hand and just moves with your body or your muscle to try to release that fascia.
Okay. And fascia is the layer under your skin, between your muscles and your skin?
I believe so, yeah.
It's like a web. That's what I understand. And it's very important, and we don't really pay much attention to it.
Yeah. So there's a book, and I think most adoptees and people who are kind of in this space knows, because it's a very famous book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, it's about trauma.
Yeah. And I personally have not read the book, so I cannot speak to it, but I've heard amazing things about it.
Yeah, I've read it. It's really good if you can get through it. And this is one of the things that he suggests in that book, to dig through some of the trauma that it's not in your frontal lobe of your brain. That's why talk therapy doesn't really hit it.
Yeah.
So something like that primal scream, that will get it, or massage, things that are physical, or things like music or art, acting. Mm-hmm. Actually, acting is in there.
I'm not surprised, because it has a very therapeutic effect.
Yeah. Where
you have to deal with and work with your emotions.
Yeah.
Like I said, that was a gateway that introduced me to the healing process that I went through.
That's amazing.
Or that I'm still going through, right?
Yeah.
So I went to, her name is JJ Morales. She's amazing. I just lay it on the table and she just touches you and just moves and separates. And it's not like a hard, tough, like massage therapy where they just get into your muscle and try to loosen that tight muscle up. It's not that. It's more of just placing a calm hand and just slowly just moving it.
More energetically, maybe.
Yeah, it's so weird.
And what kind of healing has that brought you? What does it do for you?
Well, the first time I went, I didn't see any vision. So what I was told before I went was a lot of her patients see visions. They end up actually sitting up on the table crying. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't believe that, right?
Okay.
I didn't believe it. I really didn't believe it. But I went in there with an open mind. And again, here, boy, was I wrong. So she did her myofascia thing on me. And my first session, I saw colors. I didn't see necessarily any visions.
Okay.
But after the hour session, I literally sat in my car for 10, 15 minutes like a wet noodle. It was the best massage I've ever gotten.
Just did a lot of releasing.
Oh my God. It was like I literally sat there just staring off into space. And I'm like, I can't drive because that was the most relaxed I have ever been.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, there's definitely something here. So I went back to her. I've been back to her, multiple times. And during those sessions, there were definitely visions. Wow. There was one moment where I actually met my younger self.
Oh, wow.
I met my younger self, and that was weird. And that's when I started to realize, talking to other people, when I was telling them about, hey, I met my younger self. This is weird. And they're like, yeah, that happens. This is part of the healing process. It's not an uncommon thing to eventually meet your younger self, to be able to, I don't want to say disassociate, but be able to take care of.
Kind of reparent yourself.
Yeah, kind of reparent yourself and understand what happened.
That's fascinating.
Then that's when I started, okay, there's something here. I want more. Give me more. And then I was introduced to ketamine therapy.
Okay.
I had no idea ketamine was actually legal in a therapeutic way.
I'm doing ketamine too through my doctor. Yeah. Are you doing it like that?
Yeah. So I don't go to clinical settings, which I kind of do wish, and maybe I will maybe in the future, but I did the at-home therapy.
Okay. Right. They send you the lozenge or something?
Yeah.
Okay. How's ketamine been for you?
Man, the first 4 or 5 sessions were almost transformational.
Wow.
My third session was probably the biggest one.
Wow. So it gave you some realizations or brought you peace, or what did it do for you?
Without getting too much into it, I genuinely felt like I crossed over. Really? That was my third session, and my only session where I felt like I crossed over. I haven't had an experience like that since.
So you're saying you accessed the beyond, or you died? What are you saying you crossed?
It felt like I crossed over. I actually met my birth mother, my birth father.
Okay.
And I was a kid. It was like I genuinely had something I longed for, I think, all these years, was to have a family.
Wow.
An actual biological family.
Wow. So that brought that to you. And then the nice thing about ketamine is it's pretty short acting, and then you're a little woozy for a little bit, but then you're back. So it didn't like leave you there. It brought you back. So
it brought me back. So it's a crazy thing. I had a conversation with, they apologized profusely. Like they apologized just like over and over again.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I met my younger self. That's how it started. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of morphed into his body. And then it was kind of back into the scene of, I have a family. Like my parents were right there waiting for me at the beach.
Oh, wow.
They were together.
Okay.
I knew that they weren't together, but they were together for this family's sake.
Okay. Wow. That's beautiful. I bet it was amazing and a little disorienting.
Yeah. It's just, I don't, yeah, I have to say, I literally felt like I was there.
Yeah.
I literally felt like I was there. After that interaction, I actually went to, I don't know if it was heaven. I don't know if it was a version of where all your ancestors are.
Okay.
But I was in this space where I was surrounded by all the ancestors, all the people that I knew that passed.
Okay.
And the ancestors that I didn't know, their faces weren't very recognizable.
Okay. But you figured that they were your ancestors too?
It was a known feeling.
Okay.
Right? Like you just knew that it was your family. This was your whole family. And they surrounded me. And all I could feel at that moment was just a lot of love, a lot of compassion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. That was the only time I've actually had that moment. I haven't had a repeated moment since.
Yeah.
I came out of that thing just crying my eyes out.
Yeah, I bet.
I've had other sessions where I met my younger self, or I met my birth mother, I met my birth father. That third session where it was just so different from the other sessions that I cannot describe how real it felt.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I totally believe that you had that profound experience, and psychedelics are kind of amazing. It sounds like you've gotten lots of support around it too with your therapist, and you're not just doing it for fun.
No.
It's not exactly fun, but it can be transformative. And it sounds like you're taking care of yourself before and after. And it sounds like your heart is really opening and you're getting a lot of healing through that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's opened up a gateway of me trying other things. I've always heard of Reiki, and I thought that was just snake oil too.
Okay.
But there's also something there. If you go to the right person, I always try to do my homework and get referrals. And to go to the right person.
Yeah.
And I went to a Reiki session with Andrea here in Austin, Texas.
Nice.
And there's something there. Yeah. There's just something there if you're open to it.
The energy work kind of stuff. I know it's a little woo-woo.
Absolutely.
And I don't understand any of it really, but geez, whatever helps, right? If you find something that doesn't hurt you or anyone else and that it helps open things up, go for it. I think that's amazing. There's so many different ways that people can help, and there's different modes of finding help. I admire you for being open. And I know creating your film is probably also very helpful.
Yeah.
That process of creating, kind of rewriting your story or going through your story in a creative process, that must be very helpful as well.
It is. And kind of revisiting this topic of conversation of healing, I want the listeners who are skeptical about this, take it from a skeptic like myself.
Okay.
I did not believe in any of this stuff.
Yeah, you're a macho military guy, right?
Well, that's what I try to carry myself as, but I'm not,
You're not that anymore, right?
No,
right,
I'm
right.
not. But take it from a total skeptic that just believed that this was all complete BS. And it wasn't necessarily my machismo behind it. It was more of, where's the science behind it? I don't believe in this stuff.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's science. I don't know, because I never did my own research on this, but I didn't believe in this stuff. And then all I'm telling all the skeptics who may be listening, just go in there with an open mind, because you're not going to lose anything.
Yeah.
You have so much more to gain than you're not going to lose anything. You might lose a little money here and there, but at least try it with an open mind. Yeah. And I would say a good majority of people, it can be pretty positive experience.
If people wanted to get a hold of you and ask questions or get on your mailing list for your film when it comes out, how can they find you?
They can go on voiceofwatersfilm.com.
Okay.
And they can enter their email. And it's just a landing page for right now.
Yeah.
We're still in early production. We've done a lot of interviews for the documentary portion of it, but it is going to be mostly a narrative film that we're working on.
Yeah. I've seen just a few clips of the not for public consumption part of your film, and it was really incredible. And I definitely want to hear immediately as soon as it comes out, when it's available to the public, and support you as much as I can when it does come out. So please let me know.
Oh, thank you.
Well, your family situation is one of the more complicated ones I've ever heard. It's got a lot of trauma. There's a lot of love in there too, and a lot of just people doing their best, from all the different angles. I try as a life philosophy to believe that everyone is doing the very best they can at any moment in time. And it sounds like a lot of people were doing their best, and it still made it really hard on you. So I'm acknowledging all of that, all those complexities for you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story, Jonathan. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, we're sending you all our best.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So listeners, after you check out Jonathan's website, go find Unraveling Adoption at unravelingadoption.com. If you go to the page called Events on our website, you will find some upcoming events. And if you're listening to this episode right when it came out, you will hear this in time to find out about Sunday's Medicine Circle with Miyoko Iguro. She is a plant medicine specialist and a transracial adoptee herself. And if you, like Jonathan, have explored ketamine or ayahuasca or psilocybin or LSD or DMT and are interested in integrating what you've learned into your regular life. Miyok is an amazing guide and coach, and we are offering these approximately monthly for adoptees only. So it's a medicine circle for adoptees. It's this Sunday, October 20th. And check out our website, unravelingadoption.com/events to find out more and to register. Thank you all for listening. Jonathan and I want you all to stay
safe.